It's time for the review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning with Arise News analyst Dr. Constance Ikoku. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Nkechi. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
I'm great, and you?
I am wonderful, and good morning to you, Charles, and Yolanda.
Good morning,
Good morning, Dr. Constance.
All right, look at the papers with us this morning. We have Iyo Akera. Iyo, also, you've been away. Welcome back, and we're glad that you're able to join us today.
It's a pleasure. Good to be here.
Okay. Hello there, and welcome to the program. We'll begin with this day newspaper. In this day, stakeholders, JP Morgan's analysts, hail leadership change at NNPCL, say it's a new dawn. While reactions have continued to trail the dissolution of the board of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, and JP Morgan's Africa Emerging Markets Research Team sees this as a major step in reforming the industry, especially with regard to improving transparency and generating better flow of oil dollars to the government. Shall we see the Punch newspaper still on the same story, if we can pull that up? And in the Punch, it says, why Tinubu sacked Kyari, NNPCL board, according to officials. And then on to Daily Trust 2 on the same story. On Daily Trust headline, we have why Tinubu sacked Kyari, dissolved NNPCL board. All these articles are making the same point, that this reshuffle was based on performance and the need to rejig the system, essentially implying that NNPCL is not a civil service outfit, but a company that needs to be run by core professionals and analysts and industry experts. So, there seems to be excitement in some quarters regarding this shake-up. At the same time, for a sector hobbled by poor transparency, theft, sabotage, limited access to capital, exit of oil majors, inefficiency, bureaucratic delays, this new team has a lot of cleaning up to do as they take charge.
I agree with you. Most Nigerians this morning, I'm sure they will be excited because if you look at the oil and gas sector, particularly the downstream sector, it has been quite bedeviled with all kinds of problems. With JP Morgan's team endorsing this, the president's action, it means that, of course, it is also going to engender more international confidence in the sector. So for me this morning, it is something that it is an action that is long in coming. Most Nigerians expect this. As I said earlier, they did expect this. Mele Kyari, who has been removed as the GCO of the NNPC, was appointed in 2019. He's been in the saddle for about 6 years, really. And so within the 6 years, one can also say he has done his best. Under his watch, the NNPC declared profit and losses, and you know what that happened. I mean, you know what happened when the initial profits were declared, and about 1 month later, the company also declared losses, and that generated a whole lot of conversation and controversy. So this morning, the president's action is good. It's a welcome development. This is long overdue. The president thinks that by 2030, Nigeria should be producing about 30 million barrels of crude, and between now and 2027, there should be a stabilization of about 2 million barrels production per day. And for gas, the president also believed that the new team should be looking at 10,000 cubic meters by before 2027, and much more than that by 2030. And of course, conversely, there will be more forex inflow, foreign exchange inflow that can stabilize the local forex market. So overall, it's a good development. You could see stakeholders actually jubilating. And I'm sure Nigerians are still studying the development. But for me this morning, it's a welcome development. Mele Kyari has done his best, and it's time to move on.
Very ambitious goals by the president. I mean, the ordinary Nigerians may not understand the intricacies and details involved. All they want to see is a stabilized economy that puts money in their pocket. So we're going to have to watch and see how this new team takes off and how they do. over the course of the coming months. Let's move on to Daily Independent. Sultan asks governors to treat all Nigerians as indigenes. The Sultan of Sokoto and President General of Nigeria Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs, Alhaji Muhammad Saad Abubakar, spoke in the light of the northerners that were killed recently in Edo State. He said in his state of Sokoto, there are no non-indigenes. Instead, what they have is a resident of other communities. He also cautioned against using social media to spread falsehood and misinformation. I mean, very valid points raised by the Sultan. However, the word indigene has become quite controversial in Nigeria. While it typically refers to the people who are considered the original inhabitants of a particular area, often linked to a specific ethnic group or lineage, it has created a divide between original inhabitants and settlers who lay claim to land and other resources and opportunities, fueling conflict and resentment. It also ties into the farmer-herder conflict, which has been managed quite poorly by governments across board, or if it has been managed at all. So while the Sultan may mean well, this topic is not just a newspaper talk, it's about policy and government intervention without prejudice to any particular ethnic group. Charles, please jump in here, because I know you come from a state that suffered, the crisis of settler herder, problem. Not only Benue, there's Plateau and other states in the north.
True that. We have the problem of ethnicity in Nigeria, and it goes so deep, it's incredible, and it permeates every strata of society. Even our lawmakers in the National Assembly, one of their debates, you had them divided clearly along ethnic lines. So the Sultan's advice is very essential, but then it goes so deep. It's something that requires not just, a pronouncement from a traditional ruler, but all Nigerians have to come together to decide to stay together as one nation, because apparently we see ourselves as ethnic nationalities instead of as members of one nation. The problem of the herders, and I guess that's probably the deep-seated issue behind the killings of those hunters in Edo State. I believe sincerely that the locals suspected that they were armed herders in disguise, so to say, and visited jungle justice on them. But on the other hand, the problem of herdsmen attacking communities is not being dealt with. I think it's something that's being swept under the carpet, under whatever guise. We have to start addressing that matter first.
Yeah.
Violence of armed herders on farming communities. Now these men carry weapons, but every other person carrying a firearm is branded a criminal. That's where the problem now starts. And so whenever the local communities are confronted with whatever remotely resembles an armed herdsman, they definitely would take action. Unfortunately, what happened was a case of mistaken identity and is reverberating, but then it has actually brought to the fore a problem that's being ignored. And if we don't deal with it soon enough, we may just have a country that is so violently divided along ethnic lines.
Well, we hope we don't have that. And I think quickly, the Sultan's message is that of, I think he was trying to push a pan-Nigerian message. And I don't think it didn't come at a better time, or it couldn't have come at a better time. Right now in Nigeria, we're dealing a lot with, like you said, Dr. Ikuku, settlers, non-indigenous, strangers, passers-by, this and that. So I think the time to preach pro-Nigerianism is right now. And I think in Nigeria, when you have, obviously, your NIN, your identity card says you're Nigerian. However, we know that in the bottom line, your access to land, sometimes education, jobs, justice, often depends on sort of where you come from, or where your parents come from, or your ethnicity. And so this is a bigger topic that we have to talk about, and it's a really good time for the Sultan to pass this sort of message.
It is, you know, so it's not just about talk. You know, we talk so much in this country. For many years we've been talking about this, but actually the policies and the actions that will change it. Because if we're trying to be a modern state, which I assume is what we're trying to do, and you're not making the steps towards that particular goal, that what happens is, you know, what is currently going on in the country.
Our leaders don't seem to be helping matters, Dr. Constance, because they themselves are really very guilty of the state of affairs. I mean, when running for political office, they'll first of all ask you, where are you from? And you can't be from the southeast and run for political office in the north.
All right, lots of challenges for the country.
I need to make this very important point. Yes, in as much as the Sultan has made this point, which resonates with many people, the Sultan also left an important issue out. You know, when armed herders were asked to leave the forest in the south, the Sultan didn't speak. I didn't hear the voices from the north asking their people to come out of the forest. Rather, what we heard was that it's part of their culture, particularly the Fulanis, without necessarily stereotyping anyone, that it is part of their culture to stay in the bushes, in the forest, to herd their animals. And of course, you know the problem in the south at the moment is that of insecurity, that of people unable to access their farmlands. In Enugu, as we speak, there's heavy tension. I just returned from the Niger Delta, particularly in Delta State. There's a lot of tension in Delta State also, particularly the northern part of Delta State, where women and people can't access their farms, and they're accusing a particular ethnic group of raping and killing women and children and farmers. So the groups in the north should also speak out against this, because this may not, the killing of these individuals in Uromi may not be the last if we continue to gloss over this issue and not addressing it. It's very important.
All right, charged situation everywhere. Hopefully the government is actually, not only government at the federal level, actually the states as well, do something about it. Let's move on to the Guardian newspaper. Ighodalo rejects verdict. Okpewolo's olive branch heads to appeal court. No surprises there, you know, by the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Asue Ighodalo, with regard to proceeding to the appeal court. Most candidates these days pursue electoral cases up to the Supreme Court, reaffirming the assertion that the courts now decide elections. Yolanda, I know many people feel that the courts should not be deciding elections in a so-called democracy, but it's quite common now in Nigeria.
So it seems. You know, as we're taking the report, I noticed that amongst all the cheers and all the happiness that was being shown by the lawyers that were represented there, there was also this undertone that was, you know, quite outspoken in saying that please don't forget who voted this governor into office. And I think, you know, this highlights the ongoing tensions with the legal community, and just as you said, when it comes to elections. But it really does seem like it is becoming a norm of the day. It's becoming a norm of the day, and something that is being widely accepted slowly but surely. And a lot of people don't seem to be on board with it, but because that's what's been put in our faces almost on the daily. I mean, look at the reports we've been holding in the past weeks. It's been a tussle over the election, the different election results that have come up and brought certain people into power, for example, Senator Natasha, and now bringing that together with the judiciary system, it complicates things. But I don't know if that is going to be the order of the day for Nigeria. Only time can tell. Only time can tell. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it's becoming the order of the day. Highly litigious. When you're preparing for elections, you're also looking for funds to run, you know, the cases in the courts. Let's stay with the Guardian. There's another story there. Trump slams 14% tariff on Nigerian exports. President Donald Trump slammed this tariff at half the rate which country, you know, other countries charge the U.S. The 14% on Nigeria is against the 27% charged by Nigeria to the U.S. So Nigeria's total trade, 4.59 trillion naira, you know, export to the U.S. a lot of people say it's not a lot, so not a lot of exports going from Nigeria to the U.S. A bulk of it is crude oil, and so, but we also import quite a bit from them, 1.05 trillion worth of goods from that country. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this, Eagle? It doesn't look like we'll be majorly affected. Very briefly.
Well, I don't know. A lot of people who don't understand what is playing out are blaming President Trump. But Trump has made it very clear that, his second coming to power is to set America free. He's concentrated so much on trade and commerce and industry and employment, of course, border security and illegal immigrants. With regards to Nigeria, well, it's almost harmless compared to the 30% that the U.S. is slamming on South Africa, with South African delegation already trying to engage the U.S. authorities to try and explain their expropriation act. They think that the expropriation act, which Trump is not happy about, is what has led to the very high tariff that the U.S. administration is slamming on South Africa. But with Nigeria, I think it is not so bad for us. The U.S. will continue to import crude oil from the country. What does Nigeria really import from the? I remember my days when I was in secondary school. There's this rice called Uncle Ben's rice. It was so popular then. It was almost and it was cheap. But with time,
we now eat our father rice, okay?
Oh yes.
that's what we now eat, and it's healthier anyway.
Absolutely, we do not drive so many Chrysler cars and Ford cars. A few Ford cars are driven in Nigeria actually, but in terms of consumables, finished products, yes. So it's good for Nigeria. Let's see how it works out.
Okay, let's move quickly to the international headlines. Since you already mentioned South Africa, let's go to the Citizen newspaper. SA sets record straight in the U.S. Top-level delegation from South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation met with Trump officials to clear misconceptions about the expropriation bill and equity laws. This follows misinformation by some lobbying groups. There were talks initially initiated by now expelled SA ambassador to the U.S., Ibrahim Rasool. And Nkechi, let me come to you. As someone who has lived in Washington, D.C., I know very well the power of lobbying groups in that city. Countries and organizations usually employ lobbying groups to advance their personal interests or their country's interests with the U.S. government. So the South African government is doing something necessary here because it's been quite tough relationship recently between South Africa
and the
US.
And I agree with you because of how strong these lobbyists are trying to pass their own perspective out. South Africa had to swing into action. Remember that South Africa is positioning itself as a G20 member.
Yes.
They're having a G20 summit in South Africa.
Well, it is already.
Yes, it is, but it still has to position itself in a way that is sort of globally accepted. And if you have this story, they're pushing the story in America when it comes to this controversial expropriation bill. South Africa has to swing into action to say, look, this is not what we're doing. Actually, what they say they're doing is they're reversing discrimination. And so it's important for them to go and tell their stories and put out their perspectives. It's their story to tell. And we'll see how that goes.
Well, good luck to them. Daily Express, UK imports to US will face 10% levy compared to EU's 20%. Brexit, Britain escapes worst of Trump's tariffs pain. Economists are warning that this could still wipe out UK growth next year. Well, what caught my attention in this headline is the use of the word Brexit. And that really puts everything in context because the UK is already suffering from the effects of leaving the European Union. Economists and analysts say that the UK would be £311 billion worse off by 2035 due to Brexit. Yolanda, it's it's going to be a roller coaster for the UK.
Absolutely. Hasn't the roller coaster begun already?
Yes. and that's why Keir Starmer is making all those policies, trying to revive the economy.
Yes, I think what stands out for me the most is how Trump has managed to destroy a relationship. I mean, it may not be out in the open, but it's very obvious to the eye to see that he has destroyed a relationship that has been there and built over time. All in his need to assert his dominance and power. And the UK, you know, has managed to negotiate different trade agreements and to mitigate the effects of these tariffs. But only time will tell. As you said, you know, Keir Starmer's administration is really struggling at the moment. We saw how the press and, you know, Britain at large literally had Minister Reeves, you know, torn apart last week and in the past days. So I can only hope for the best and see what has to happen. They're saying the worst is over, but we wait and see.
Well, definitely we will wait and see. Igor Akera, we thank you so much for taking time to discuss the papers with us this morning.
And we'd also like to thank you, Dr. Constance Ikoku, for joining us this morning to take a look at the front pages. And that's all we have for you here on Daybreak. Thanks for watching. I'm Kichi Nana.
I'm Charles Erukar. It's goodbye from me.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.